From Beijing, we will now travel to the Metaverse. To be truthful, I'm not really sure what that is or what that is. But I'm certain when Michael Libby and his panel of creative leaders are done, we'll definitely want to visit and will better understand the immense possibilities.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Libby, founder and CEO of Worldbuildr. I'm very happy to be here on day 3 of the SATE Global Conference to talk about the Metaverse. We have a great panel here assembled for you, and purposefully, these people have been chosen because they come from outside the industry. They're experts in VR, AR, game engines, game design, immersive media, but specifically not theme parks and museums. They come from the digital world, and they're here to teach us about it and how it's about to revolutionize everything we know about the physical world when it comes to entertainment. I'm so happy to have you all here, and I think I'm going to start by asking the question that is on everybody's mind in the audience, likely. What is the metaverse? There is no answer really in Merriam-Webster yet because it's so new. So I'm hoping that the experts that I've assembled can tell us. Sarah, why don't you give me your definition first?
I believe that the metaverse is essentially a full integration and hybridizing completely the digital world lapsed on top of the physical world. I mean, we're already getting there with a lot of AR. And sure, VR you can put on your goggles and there you are in this new world, but you still can't touch anything. And so the metaverse is going to be this entirely new layer. It's kind of a new language that we're all going to be speaking. And we're getting there. We're already, texting with people and then communicating with them in person. We're already watching something on a screen at home and then a screen on our phone. So I think it's going to be this entire new digital overlay onto our entire existing world. And we're going to live in both and in all of it fully integrated.
Adam, how about you? You've kind of focused on the music industry and the live performance area. What are some of the artists that you're talking to? Like, how do they talk about the metaverse and how they're trying to enter it?
Well, I think it's cool that the metaverse is even a pop culture lingo. It used to be relegated to just sci-fi nerds like us. We're like, oh yes, the Matrix. But I feel like movies like Ready Player One and big gaming platforms like Fortnite and Roblox have helped popularize the concept and the term, even though one could argue the concept has existed for a long time. I think artists and the music industry are really interested in reaching audiences that they can't reach. I mean, at the end of the day, Travis Scott playing in Fortnite is about reach and engagement and also self-expression. So, we did a show not too long ago with The Weeknd where we had 3 million live virtual attendees. But the show didn't look like a concert. The whole thing started with him asking the audience whether he should lick a frog. And if they voted yes, he would go down this psychedelic journey. And if he voted no, actually, we didn't have a plan for that because we just knew people would say yes. And so I think artists are interested in, just like when music videos came out, finding new ways to visualize and make their art interactive along different vectors.
Gotcha. And just for our viewers who don't know, Adam, your platform, and correct me if I'm wrong, is essentially a musical artist will do a performance capture that is broadcast live to anybody within this 3D venue that you've created.
Yeah, totally. We started as a virtual reality company. And then about halfway through our history, like a couple years ago, we pivoted out into distributing the content to games and streaming platforms. And so now we describe what we do as almost an on-ramp into the metaverse. Attending a wave, so far this year, we've done 2 shows on our new platform called wave.watch. It's sort of like a halfway point. Like you can see a window into this 3D virtual space where artists like John Legend and The Weeknd are actually playing these live animated shows. But you can also interact with the show and send fireworks and gifts and vote on things that happen that actually change the course of the concert.
Yeah, there was something I just saw the other day, which was you had an artist as performing as their avatar, running a live poll about what tattoo they should get next. and they got, instant results from this massive audience. Then the artist got the tattoo, but the avatar of the artist then also got updated with the new tattoo to match. So the audience kind of saw it on his virtual self. Like, that stuff is just, that's just next level.
Yeah, it's like stuff that it's experience or a mode of self-expression that you can't achieve at a real concert. And so for us, like, we started the company as musicians and visual artists, and that's what attracted us to the metaverse, so to speak. But the broader concept is just this massive 3-dimensional space that has real-time interaction, a bunch of different people can plug in a bunch of different ways. It starts with something like Second Life, or you could even argue that Clubhouse is a metaverse that's just audio based. And then it ends with Ready Player One, hopefully not so dystopian.
That's cool. Yeah. Michaela, from your journalism background, how does sort of extending the physical world into the virtual world, how does that new medium kind of communicate differently with viewers than traditional media?
That's a great question. I think it actually is very similar to the way that the Wave is doing their work. It allows us to have real-time feedback with the audience. It allows us to be able to make the audience feel like they have an active part of the experience that we're building for them, right? Very similar to theme park, very similar to a building design, architectural design. We're not just thinking about the content of producing something and putting it out there in a magazine or putting it out there in a Instagram account. We're also thinking about, okay, what's the architecture around the content, right? How does the audience find the content? How does the content continue to engage the audience? Is there an impact strategy to saying, here's where the audience wants to go to? Or if the audience isn't interested in learning more about that topic, but there's a different topic we want to move them towards, could there be a pathway for them to explore that? And so for me, the digital reality, as I like to call it, is something we're already playing in every single day, which one of my other fellow panelists spoke to, where, you send a text message to somebody and then you see them in real life. I like to think of it even beyond that. We're even right now filming a real life panel in a digital experience with a digital reality platform. So if we're playing already in the digital reality on a day-to-day basis, for me, the metaverse and the extension of media content and the extension of absorbing content is in of itself the extension of the web. It's a spatialized version of the web experience that we currently already have. You get up every day, you go and you look at your emails, you go and you look at your social media. Now that's all very much in a 2D modeled interface. But when we start to add layers like virtual environments, augmented reality, that's when we're talking about making the web not just a 2D interactive experience, but now a spatialized experience, which in of itself impacts journalism. It impacts storytelling. It impacts concerts. It impacts theme parks. It impacts hotels. It impacts almost every part of your life, because we're already integrating ourselves into the web, but taking the web and putting it into a spatialized version of itself is sort of that next level of the digital reality that we're already playing in every day. So I hope that answers that question.
Definitely. That's really interesting. Dimensionalizing the web. So instead of scrolling up and down on a 2D plane, which is what we've been doing since computers, we would essentially go into it and be exploring and navigating a virtual world, which would be the web.
Exactly. Like if you had Facebook and everyone had their own home instead of Facebook profiles, you go into that person's home, instead of interacting with their photo gallery via the way we interact with it now, maybe you're actually interacting with the photo gallery inside their living room as an actual photos on the wall that you get to kind of spin through. Or instead of interacting with, their family that you see in a very 2D written way, maybe it's an actual family tree, like a physical tree that's growing outside of their Facebook home, right? So just thinking about ways that like this version of the web will continue to exist to make it more interactive, to make it more immersive, because we're already playing and spending dollars there, which in of itself is sort of a way of saying the oasis, the metaverse, the digital reality.
Sure. Yeah, I always like to explain it as a kind of like a sixth sense that's out of our spectrum, like how dogs can hear higher and lower frequencies. This is just part of our world that, if you slide down your AR goggles, all of a sudden you can see it. And you know, where it starts and where it ends is going to continue to blur. But you know, it's very important from a strategy standpoint. Like it is going to disrupt Adam for you. You know, like traditional business plans in terms of like ticket sales and concerts and revenue and merchandise and all these things. You know, for theme parks, it's going to, hopefully some of our viewers will be hearing this and they'll start thinking, you know, maybe I should be rethinking my entire business strategy entirely. Maybe it's not about the front gate ticket anymore. Maybe if there's a subscription model with some, you know, virtual accessories and exclusive merchandise purchases and things like that. And so Lily, we can finally get to you. Thank you for waiting. So you do sort of a lot of this kind of early stage conceptual consulting and guidance of how, you know, how these brands and these corporations can, you know, kind of explore this new media landscape and enter it strategically. So what are some of the things that you would like our audience to hear coming out of this?
Definitely. Well, I think I agree with what how they've described the metaverse so far. But I think some other important pieces that are going to be part of it. One is artificial intelligence. I think you're going to see AI avatars first and machine learning first. And you're going to have a new type of customer that's a robot. And how will that look like? And what will they keep doing in the metaverse, even when you're not necessarily in it all the way? And I think we'll also see new types of civilizations or governance inside the metaverse with decentralized networks, and how we're seeing the rise and fall of cryptocurrency on a daily basis, and decentralization, and how will that affect the virtual world. Because when we think of the metaverse, I think it's a digital first, but it's like a 3D digital first way of thinking. So I like what Sarah said and what everyone said about how it's overlaying the digital on top of the physical, but it's also how can we capture and the physical world, our physical things, but create them as like digital first in the metaverse.
And I think that our audience is changing too, where, I mean, just sort of taking a rough glance, it seems like all of us are more or less in the same age range. I'm seeing, you know, a lot of kids younger than us. That's all they care about are these digital ways to express themselves. I mean, you know, obviously I'm not saying anything new in terms of Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and things like that, but I mean, they're avatars. And we are getting really close to that Ready Player One immersive world where everyone is engaging with each other remotely in this 3D space. And, you know, that's another point that I actually want to make is, you know, this is not VR. It can be viewed in VR, but what we're talking about is a 3D virtual world, but that is not synonymous with VR. A metaverse is multi-platform. You know, it can be accessed and explored and viewed through a smartphone or computer, you know, game console or VR headset. But those are just different ways to navigate it with different levels of immersiveness and graphics.
And you know, it's interesting that over the pandemic, the media and press started using the term virtual reality to describe non-VR or headset mounted experiences. Virtual reality now means Zoom, it means playing Fortnite or Roblox, according to the press. When you're in the industry, you get so focused on the actual technology behind it, you know? But I think that the concept of the metaverse or VR, or whatever you want to call it, it's actually like a continuum, right? Like people in Roblox are in VR and they're in the metaverse. I mean, Roblox is basically a giant user-generated theme park. And so I think to that generation, that looks more similar to something like Disneyland than we might think.
Yeah, one way I like to describe it to somebody who's just coming in is you have the digital reality and the physical reality. You're very familiar with both, especially if you own a laptop or a smartphone. we use headset mounted displays, virtual reality headsets, augmented reality as the communicators between the two, right? They're just the tools. They're just the mediums, but you already have these two realities living out in their day-to-day lives. There's people sitting at the coffee shop right now down the street from me. There's also a bunch of kids playing in Roblox. They're living in two different realities. One's digital, one's physical. And the way we connect those two is through mediums like virtual reality, through mediums like augmented reality, through mediums like Snapchat and Instagram with the filters and the ways that we overlay physical on digital and digital on physical. So I think it's a great way of describing what's happening. And it's funny that the media is getting it wrong, right? Or like doesn't necessarily know because they don't have the language to be able to explain things like that.
One thing that I'm really interested in with all of this, we were talking about the media and how people are describing it and explaining it. The biggest thing that everyone comes to mind, everyone's speaking about with regards to the metaverse is the holodeck and Ready Player One. And what I'm really interested in as, our group here and with everyone who's also watching is I believe it can be so much more than that. And it's really up to us to really identify what that vision is, because as we all know, sci-fi and, fiction sort of leads the efforts. If somebody creates it, an artist creates something, that's usually where engineers start going. So it's really up to us in this day to figure out what more can it become. And, it's really about us breaking the boundaries of the limits of really what can happen. Because I believe that one day you will never leave the metaverse because it's not the holodeck. You're not going to walk into a little room and you're in a box and then that's it. I feel like it's, it's always there. It's always around you. You don't take it off and put it on, but it's really, like everyone else was saying, it's this constant fusion of digital and physical.
But the thing is, it is sort of, it can be a one-to-one overlay, which sort of makes us have a lot of assumptions about what we can and cannot do. But because it exists in a game engine, actually there are some tricks that we can do, and there are new types of experiences that we can create. And that's where I think things get really interesting, is having maybe a physical anchor but a digital extension, or vice versa. Sarah, that's something you did with No Filter, right? That was your first project as Pseudonym, and that in fact did have a physical to digital extension.
Yeah. So that was our first sort of R&D test into really testing the digital and physical. We'd already done several physical experiences sort of in real life, more standard of what people are used to. We had a physical location. And the biggest aspect that I'm wanting to really work on is starting to hybridize the two together. And so like you were just saying, right now we have kind of one and we kind of have the other. And so we did this test where we brought in several hundred people and we created our own sort of small app, and we allowed people to come in. It wasn't just an app, it was a full platform that we custom built, and we allowed people to start communicating there, and we turned it into a game. There was a whole story, and because that was the point, we wanted people to overlay onto their current world into a brand new world. And what does that look like? What does that mean? What does it mean to make a digital experience in a digital world feel real and feel like you're living kind of two lives at the same time? And we also had physical components where we would have like little pop-ups here and there. We had them in different cities all over the country. We did some in LA and New York and in Philly and Orlando. And it was really interesting to see how people connected digitally, also physically, and how their identities changed. Sort of what one of you was talking about was, I think, identity. And if you have an avatar, if you have a different persona that you're portraying digitally, what does that mean in the real world? And I think that's something really fascinating, because you are a different person no matter who, depending on who you're around. And in this world, I think it's a great opportunity for people to be really who they want to be and sort of play who they want to be. And I think it can really sort of help unite all of us. So yeah, it was just, it was a start into our understanding of how to start really integrating that and bringing this sort of metaverse, our version, to life.
I think that's great, and a really great example of why it's important to have your own types of virtual reality and metaverse creations as your own like physical pop-ups, because we live with like Facebook is the #1 headset builder for consumers at the moment. But Facebook wants you to be yourself in Facebook. They want you to use your real name, and they're working on avatars that just look exactly like you. So how are you supposed to be something else creative or take on a different personality if Facebook's trying to force you to be you? And so I think that's a great example of why we can use this new technology to step out of the current companies that have a hold on it and make something different.
Michaela, that's a really good segue to ask you about your work with Crux. Can you tell me about that?
So Crux is a cooperative that is about empowering the Black imagination and the Black creator. So I'm an ally that gets to work with Crux as a consultant and a creative producer. And a lot of the work we've been doing is really thinking about the communities that have been marginalized in a lot of the previous sort of rounds of digital making, whether that's social media making or technology making, and really thinking about how we can make sure these narratives are pushed to the forefront and making sure those narratives are the ones getting, a lot of the funding that's going in and getting a lot of the identity. This is thinking even beyond just content creation. This is thinking about, who's optimizing the headset for hair that is not necessarily being optimized for, who's optimizing the implicit biases that could come from tracking in these technologies, right? The way that people move, the way that people express themselves, and who's also making sure that there's really accurate avatars to portray different people of different colors and different backgrounds that don't just continue to perpetuate harmful stereotypes. And so I think what's really amazing about that is someone mentioned, this can move beyond just thinking about a one-to-one scale. And I agree. Right now, real estate is kind of unlimited. There's all these amazing platforms that are being built in the digital reality that people are able to express themselves almost infinitely. And making sure that spaces like real estate and space in the digital reality don't become these commodities that they currently are in the physical world, right? Like real estate in the physical world can be very difficult to purchase and buy and have ownership over. So how do we make sure we recreate economies? I know someone said that before, within the virtual experience, within the digital reality. How do we rethink about, a inclusive, safe environment? How do we rethink making sure that how people express themselves, whether that's gender fluidity or sexuality, is a welcome and safe way of expressing themselves in the metaverse, in the digital reality? And also, how are we building tools for those types of people to be able to access the digital reality? That's, for example, making sure Wi-Fi is a human right for all. That's making sure that people have access to this reality that we're building, and not just allowing the few who have high-speed internet or the few that can pay for high-speed internet to have access to that reality. And also making sure that there's enough spaces for those places to go around too, making sure that headsets can be widely available if it is headsets or if it is some sort of way of accessing. So there's nuances happening within Crux, but it's really to be on the forefront of being sort of the people of color first mentality, in that way of making sure they don't get marginalized and left behind, as they have had to in so many different industries that are now just catching up. For example, media. We're just now having sort of the rebirth of inclusivity within media. But if we had inclusive, accurate, authentic media to begin with, we wouldn't have had to go through all these rounds of sort of exhaustion of upheaval. So hopefully the XR industry, the virtual environment industry, the digital reality industry can start in those spaces now, working authentically, actively within people of color communities, indigenous communities, Asian American communities, to make sure it's inclusive and making sure they're creating and building for all types of people now.
Definitely. And that goes back to, we were just talking about, are we building a one-to-one overlay onto our world? And, why not build a better one? Like now's our chance to build something better. We're starting to build it. These are the very early days. So let's do it, But, when it comes to presentation and seeing yourself, there's that famous line in The Matrix, where it explains why they're all dressed in leather and stuff. It's their residual self-image. It's just what they think of themselves. that's an expression thing. And it's really easy to customize and have your own version of something in the metaverse. It's really not easy in the real world setting, IRL, as some people call it. And all of a sudden, you're limited by throughput in an attraction that's in the real world, but you're not necessarily limited in the virtual world. Like, one of the best examples that I use to explain the metaverse is when you go to Disneyland. It used to be when you visited Mickey, you'd have to wait outdoors in line for 2 hours in the sun. And they realized this, and they built Mickey's house in Toontown, which all of a sudden it has, 3 Mickeys in 3 different rooms. Sorry if I'm ruining the magic for anyone, but, they can scale up and down based on demand, and they're essentially adding instances of that same experience to increase throughput. But they're also adding operating cost when they do that. The difference with the metaverse or the virtual world is you can have a small venue and still have that intimacy of a small venue, but it can be an instance, and you could have 1,000 of them, or, you can scale up and down for the actual demand in real time, and it costs you almost nothing. So this idea that I really want to get into our audience's head is, if you're expecting 100,000 people to show up for this metaverse thing, why do they have to sit in the nosebleeds at the Hollywood Bowl? Everyone should have a front row seat. You can just create instances of the same thing. And these are the types of things that we should be thinking about differently. So, Adam, obviously that kind of leads directly to some of the things that you're specializing in terms of relationships between fans and bands and how they express themselves and allows artists to connect with their audiences in a much more intimate way. I guess there's no real question there. I just kind of wanted to throw that grenade into the conversation and see what happens.
Well, I have some comments. I went to Disneyland last week for the first time.
That's right.
In several years. And by the way, Michael, you were completely right about the Rise of the Resistance being the greatest theme park ride of all time. It completely blew my mind and reminded me how amazing Disneyland is. And just walking around, seeing kids running up to Mickey Mouse. He was socially distanced, sort of on a rooftop, but kids would run up to him and be like, "Hey, Mickey," just wanting him to notice them. And that interaction really has always inspired me. So when you go to a wave show, the artist can interact with the audience way more than at a real concert. And so it's sort of like that connection between the performer and the audience at scale and in new ways, which I think is really interesting. Michaela, I was really inspired by what you're saying about sort of building a better world, or reality being so broken that perhaps in the metaverse we could create better systems that are more inclusive, that are just more fair. That always inspired me when we started working on our platform. We made this call where none of our avatars would have gender or race. And people treated each other better just based on the social dynamics. It was actually a really good vibe. But then I felt like back when we were only a VR company, it felt so exclusionary. Back then, the only way to get access to the platform was to use a Rift or an HTC Vive, which require a pretty expensive setup. So I think the technology needs to be a lot more accessible to deliver on that vision. But that said, when I was walking around Disney, I was thinking about throughput, Michael, because we had that conversation about the 3 or 4 Mickeys. And I was just Disneyland is so expensive. It is crazy. And it's such a shame that only a small amount of kids ever get to go. And if you get to go, it changes your life forever, like it did for me when I was a kid. Same with all location-based entertainment, like Burning Man. How many people get to go to Burning Man? I've actually never been, so I'm not going to poo-poo it. But it's always seemed like a little exclusionary, right? Concerts. Not that many people get to go to concerts. If you look at the number of people who have ever attended a concert or attend on a regular basis, it is a tiny, tiny fraction of music fans. And so I think some of these technologies, not limited just to VR, but gaming, some of the stuff that we're doing with concerts, have the potential to democratize access in a really powerful way that I think will be good for the world.
I think it's an interesting discussion of inclusivity, but yet people still want like luxury. They want something that's an experience that's only unique to the few, something that's special to them, that not everyone can go to Burning Man, but I got to go. And so I think it'll be interesting how you balance giving opportunities for everyone, but still having little luxury moments or little personal moments that not anyone else can get in the metaverse. And I think I think fashion is an interesting look at how brands are doing that. Like Gucci and Louis Vuitton are starting to experiment with being like, Gucci has, for a week, they have an exhibit in Roblox, or the Burberry bag has an augmented reality app you can use. So like everyone can download and this Burberry bag augmented reality app, but you can design the bag in the app so that it only fits you. I think those are some interesting things to think about when designing your own thematic experience.
Well, and I don't think it has to feel that exclusivity level. It has to go into the world of customization, right? It can be accessible to anybody, but because they're able to customize it to be very much about them and how they want to express themselves, and we can have unlimited instances of people being able to customize, it doesn't become about, oh, I got to do this thing that no one else got to do. It got to be, I got to do this thing and I got to put a part of me into it. And now I get to take a part of me with it as it continues. And I think that's one way to think about making something more inclusionary and less about, well, what's the paywall, or what's the ability for us to be able to say these people only got to do this. Maybe they get to access something that's customizable to them because they paid that level, but that doesn't mean the whole experience becomes paywall to everybody else, right? So there's different ways of thinking about layers of accessibility.
Yeah, like maybe the 3 Mickey concept like is the solution to that. Because when I went to Disney, I was actually noticing all the things that like were exclusive about it now as an adult. Like you can cut the line if you pay a certain amount, or like there's Club 33, this club that costs tens of thousands a year to be a member of. And you go to clubs and there's like VIP seats. This is just like a function of it's a function of capitalism and the fact that there's limited space. And so perhaps the 3 Mickeys could solve that problem in the metaverse. This is the techno-utopian philosophy that I love to think about. However, sometimes I feel cynical because it started that way with Steve Jobs back in the day, and tech has become so welded to capitalism that it's hard to imagine a different future. However, maybe cryptocurrency is going to solve that.
I want to ask this panel now about, just over the last few weeks, literally, all of a sudden everyone knows that word. They know NFTs, they know Dogecoin. It's the buzz topic of the moment. I don't want to have an hour-long discussion about NFTs right now, but what I do want to discuss a little bit is the difference about the metaverse versus an AR experience or a VR experience. And I think the difference in understanding it as a concept is time and perpetuity. This is not about an experience where you catch a random Pokemon. This is, you plant a seed in AR and you come back a week later and it's grown into a flower and it's still there and other people can see it grow and you can see it grow, but it's only on that extra layer of the AR vision, so it's perpetuity and it's time. That sort of fundamentally changes the experience also for new types of storytelling. Adam, I could leave a personalized flower, growing out of Main Street at Disneyland in AR, so it doesn't disrupt anyone else's vision, but I would get to see it and I would know that it's there, and it would be a form of self-expression. So talking about things like cryptocurrency and NFTs, is there, like, do you see a time soon where people just primarily go to the virtual world, or that there is no physical tether anymore, and these virtual experiences get so elaborate and so technically sophisticated that it just becomes the new norm, where there are instances of everything, so there are no queue lines, and that becomes the new theme park. What's holding us back from that? Do you think that'll ever happen?
I think just from like a hardware standpoint, we're just not there yet. But every day we're getting closer and closer. A new headset will be released. I listened to Wall Street Journal's Future of Everything conference the other week, and the HoloLens is coming out with another version, the Microsoft HoloLens, which is they're more of a mixed reality focus. So you can be yourself and you're seeing an avatar that's your friend, but you're in a virtual world. And I think we'll definitely get to the point where you can take home a NFT token from a concert. I think I saw recently that Eminem sold his beat for the song Stan as an NFT, and a YouTuber rapper bought it and then created his own song over top of it, and was able to say on the song that it was produced by Eminem, because it technically was, even though he bought the beat. So I think you'll see things like that already happening.
So I think while I love this idea of customization and really owning your digital environment, your space, and it's all about you and everything you want to see in it, I still think that there's going to be this sort of love and need for the physical world. And, if you do go back to Ready Player One, what is the message at the very end? It's not just about your digital presence, but it's also about you and who you are as a physical being in this physical world. And, not to sound like a dinosaur about this, but there's something beautiful about our world and the tangibility and like the reality of it. And it can be raw. And I think that's something that I'm really interested to see how the digital world grows, is, as it's going to turn into the Wild West in a way as it starts growing. But I think it's sort of that rawness that really will help it thrive, because we don't want something that is just perfect. Because in the digital world, you can make a 3D model perfect. But then at the end of the day, you're like, well, it's those imperfections. And not only my appearance, but also the world, everything that I can touch, that really makes me sort of grounded. And so while we can live in our fantasy world, I don't know, I still think I want some sense of real there. And I think that's up to us to really figure out that balance and how to live in both.
Yeah, I think that's great, Sarah, especially with new movements like digital minimalism and people taking time off of social media on purpose. I think especially after this past year, people want more than ever to just go out in person and just be in person together with all the dirt and germs and everything. It's worth it, because at the end of the day, at this time, we don't have the metaverse yet. And while being on a video with you guys is awesome, it's just not the same as being together on a stage.
I really want to escape technology more and more as I get older. But it's weird because I'm CEO of a virtual entertainment company. But I think you can't stop the flow of technology as much as you want to, as we want to avoid it, or we become Luddites more and more as we get older. It's just going to happen. And if you look at the younger generation that's all growing up, not just playing Roblox, but coding it. What's the generation after that and after that? And as these technologies get better and better, that's where we're headed. And so it just is what it is. I think the way I think about it is more, one, I think reality is already a digital simulation. So this is where we're headed. It's going to be as good as reality because we're already living in it. But that's just my personal philosophy. I think about it in terms of how much agency do you have over the content and the experiences you get to have. The shitty thing about this current chapter of technology is that everything is driven by algorithms controlled by these big corporations. And so it doesn't feel like you have any real agency. You're just being spoon-fed your Instagram feed, and it's going to get worse once companies like Facebook, if they are successful, take over the metaverse through VR. Like, just imagine what that looks like when you're basically being controlled by another company. The real escape from that isn't necessarily unplugging from tech and going out into nature, because I think it's going to be harder and harder to do that. It's going to be different platforms and sort of movements that pop up, like especially around crypto. Even though I still don't completely understand the space, I think there's something there where new groups of people with specific like shared philosophies can kind of achieve power and value and utility themselves without outside the purview of capitalism or even our government. Like, that's the interesting part of the future. And so I think it's gonna be about like algorithm versus non-algorithm, and not like digital versus analog.
Yeah, and I hate to be that person to also mention that for the technology to get to the point where it is going to want to be interchangeable with physical reality, we need to figure out a clean energy system to house these data centers. Because we're talking like all of this actually exists in a cloud that just lives above us and then just gently pours rain on us every now and again, but that's not true. Like, when we talk about the cloud, when we talk about digital reality, we're actually talking about these big, ginormous plants of data that actually suck so much electricity and coal like from the ground and spew things into the air. So I also hate to be that person to say like the digital reality doesn't just exist in the digital reality. It also exists in the physical reality because we need a place to house it. And it does get housed physically, and it is not. And right now we don't have a very good system because a lot of the places building these huge plants don't really believe in clean energy. So I want the physical world to continue because I don't think there's going to ever be a world potentially that can transform you like the way nature can transform you, unless we're talking maybe 150 years into the future where you literally cannot eat unless you're like hooked in or whatever. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's like 5 senses we're talking about here, the haptics, and we're talking about real like intense technology advances. But my hope would be, as technology advances, we also get smarter as human as how these advances of technology are actually furthering our betterment in the physical world and not just detrimenting our betterment in the physical world. So figuring out these data centers, figuring out clean energy is a part of technology growing, not only for the positive parts of marginalized community, but for us as a community as a whole who live on a planet that is suffering from climate change. And technology is actually adding to that problem, not taking away from it in certain ways.
That's a really great point. And, crypto especially is an environmental disaster, basically, that's happening to this planet right now. And, to reference Ready Player One again, if you notice, when they leave VR and they go into the real world, it's not such a great place. And they've sort of given up on the physical world, and they just spend all of their time in the oasis. Something that's different from that movie, and I don't really know the answer to this, but, in Ready Player One, they go into the metaverse. It's called the Oasis there, but it's the metaverse. And they all have avatars and they all interact. Where we're at right now, I don't think we have a quote unquote the metaverse. I think we have a lot of different people trying to create a metaverse, a lot of different companies, different brands. Strategically, if I buy an NFT or if I create a custom avatar for myself, is it going to be able to go on, Facebook's platform, but then also go on Google's platform and Apple's platform? Are they all going to have competing metaverses that are stacked on top of each other in the real world? Probably, right? So really what we're looking at, and I'm going to see if this term is trademarked right after this call, is the meta multiverse, right? I mean, that's kind of what we have. So what's that all about?
Omniverse.
Yeah, right. So, there are actually a lot of competing multiverses. Is there one that's going to win out?
Like, the physical reality has undergone so many different revolutions, right? We had the agricultural revolution. We had the industrial revolution. We now are coming into the world of technological revolution. We've had so many countries redraw their borders. We've had so many wars get fought over resources. We've had, even where we're sitting right now, where I am in New York used to be the land of like the Lenape people in the physical reality. That's all kind of going to just start to happen in the digital reality. You know, we're going to have people fighting over resources. We're going to have different countries, different companies fighting over what their design of their thing is and who can have this. And I can't bring very specific materials into different countries. I can't even bring fruit from different countries into other countries, right? Same exact idea, I think, in the digital reality. You're going to have different passports. You're going to have different kind of legalations. You're going to have things you can do in this platform that you can't do in that platform.
We haven't actually, I'm surprised by this, but we haven't talked about gaming at all. We've talked about environments to explore, but we haven't actually talked about things like win-loss states or accruing points or things like that. And that surprises me. You know, what's the appetite that an audience has for a passive metaverse experience versus, you know, where it's just exploration versus an active one where they're actually participating in an interactive way?
I've seen on Twitter in the VR community some interesting topics and threads about this, how people are always talking about how to get more everyday people into virtual reality. And is it games, or are games actually like a stereotype holding virtual reality back from the masses? And virtual reality is great because you can use your whole body and be completely interactive in it. But at the end of the day, are people just wanting to like sit back and relax and have a passive experience? So I think the answer is we'll have both, because it's whatever you're up for that day and are in the mood for.
Sarah, how about you? In all of your installations, do you include any active game elements, or is it more kind of traditional theater and narrative storytelling?
Oh, it's mostly all active. And actually, I agree with Lily. I do believe that it's going to be a mix of passive and active. I mean, just like in life. I mean, that's why I think the metaverse is just going to be an extension of where we are today. I live my life both passively on the couch and actively. And so with regards to gaming, all of our experiences are mostly active because people come to want to do something. They, you know, when you go play a game, even if you're just exploring, that's still active. And my partner and I wrote the 2020 Immersive Entertainment Report. And in that, we were talking about defining different interactivity levels. And I think that's something with gaming and with immersive experiences that's probably going to hopefully develop soon, because people, I think, want to know what they're getting into. Am I getting into something that's really active and more escape room level where I have to go solve physical puzzles and do everything? But then there's the other extreme of it's just, sitting there and absorbing content. So I think moving forward, there's going to be a whole spectrum of activity level, and it's just whatever people want to do. And it's what we do in real life already.
That's also true for museums. I mean, I always filter things through the eyes of theme parks, but yeah, for museums, live events, everything. You're absolutely right. Okay, one final question for everybody. I'd like to go around and just ask everybody what is the final takeaway or message that you would like this audience to hear from you about, how coming out of this pandemic to strategically pivot their business away from being 100% location based and having more of a hybrid approach that includes a digital component.
So I have to pitch one of my clients here called Uncontained, and they create hyper immersive attractions inside a shipping container. So I'm sure for everyone listening that this call was just a lot, but you can start small. You can partner with people on this call who've done pop-ups or musical experiences. You don't have to go alone. And with Uncontained, with their attraction being in a shipping container, it can then just sit in your parking lot. So you're not taken away from your physical attractions you've already built. You've just added on with a virtual reality hyper immersive experience. So try not to get overwhelmed. There are partners out there who've done these kind of things before, and you can use them to start integrating the metaverse into your entertainment.
I think a big thing to remember is that, especially where we are today with the technology, I think our discussion's been fantastic. I'm really excited to see where we are in, 10, 20 years. But if you're working on an attraction today, it's good to remember that you don't want to just sort of slap on AR, VR and call it, new tech. It's great to remember that it is an amazing tool that you can use to further your guest experience. But at the end of the day, it's really about that, those words. It's your guest experience and what they're going to leave with and what they're going to take away from what you've created. And so if you just sort of throw something on, there's a lot of difficulties there. And it's really about that integration into it and having this sort of seamlessly come together that will make your experience that much more memorable and really stand out.
I think there's sort of two different pieces of this puzzle we're talking about. One piece we're talking about is how you can integrate it for your guests. But I think the another piece we can talk about is how you can integrate it for your team. I do think that like investing maybe a little bit into a headset to help you simulate whatever you're building, if you're building a location-based experience and you're really able to play out the show experience as you're simulating it in headset with you and your incredible team of physical fabricators to really finesse some of the story beats of what you're trying to build, or finesse some of the architecture you're trying to build, or really nail that one moment in the restaurant you're trying to create. I think using some of these technologies that are already available and out of the box could be really helpful to save a lot of money when you're actually building, because you figured out a lot of those potholes because you had a simulation version of the experience, right? And I know there's probably a lot of people on the call that know where those places could be found. So that really, to talk about like how you can integrate it now, you can integrate it as a toolkit for your actual back-end productions. When you're thinking now about your front-end productions, the second piece, your guest experience, it really goes down to the authenticity of the storytelling. But it also comes down to the fact that you're probably already doing it. If you have a location-based experience, you probably already have an Instagram, you already have a Facebook, you already have a Twitter, you already have a website, you already have a Google Map drop point. Now, think of it as, how do you just expand a little bit of that, right? Beyond just maybe an Instagram giveaway. Could you have, set up into an experience where you have different QR codes that launch you into a web portal that you've designed that play correctly with the experience? Even if it's as simple as like, hey, you can play hangman with your friend, as you're walking through the experience of waiting in the queue. And we literally just link you into a tic-tac-toe or a hangman or something fun, or like a pop-up sort of thing that is in your phone that's really easily accessible. Or maybe it's a puzzle you create on Instagram and you ask people to follow all these different handles to create a different puzzle piece of the clue as they're walking through the experience, and then they give the clue to the ride operator. The ride operator hands them like a discount to the merchandising store. Like, there's ways you can probably do it with the tools you've already built. You don't need VR, you don't need AR. You can use actual existing digital platforms and make that a digital overlay on top of your experience. So I would say try not to go crazy. Think about your budget, think about the authenticity of your story, think about the guest, and then think about maybe integrating some of these productions, processes, or tools into the back end of what you're trying to build and create to help streamline, to help avoid uh-ohs, to help make things cheaper for you all as a team. $800 on a Quest headset with a really nice PC computer with a link versus thousands of dollars with the concrete getting drilled out of the ground and you having to move $6,000 worth of landscaping, right? Two ideas.
And that leaves us with you, Adam. What's our closing thought?
Well, just speaking from personal experience, I would say very simply, don't try to recreate things that are great in reality in the virtual world. I've yet to see a really good recreation of something that I like going to, like a concert or Space Mountain at Disneyland, that is just sort of drag and dropped into the metaverse or a digital experience. So you really have to think about the things that people like about the real experience, like Space Mountain or like a concert. Think about why people like them and then build the experience in a way that doubles down on the good things. It doesn't try to just be sort of a lesser version of something that people have already experienced.
That's great advice. Make something new. All right. Well,
Totally.
thank you, everyone. I want to thank Sarah, Adam, Lily, and Michaela so much for being here. I don't think you even realize how much our audience is going to get from this and take away from it. I think this was very valuable, and I really appreciate your participation. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the metaverse.
That brings us to the close of our formal SATE Global Episode 3 presentations. Thank you so much to all of our speakers today.